No. We're going to kick off the meeting of January's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. We're going to start with introductions of new committee members. And Rachel, I'll let you introduce those of us who are new.
Okay, before we get started, I want to remind everyone to talk into the microphone so that everyone can hear us. And we have some presentations today. There is looks like a little mouse on the desk when you come up to present. Just make sure that you are audibly talking to that so that our participants online can hear you. And anytime you speak, if you could say your name, that would be great so that everyone online can understand who's talking. Again, I'm Rachel Baker. I'm the Affordable Housing Manager. And before we get started, I wanted to introduce two new members to our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. We have Isabel Milkovich, who is online today, and then Richard Reese, who is with us today. And we're just super excited to have new advisory board members be with us today, and more opportunity for us to make quorum at meetings. And I look forward to their participation in today's presentations. Take it away, Mandy.
All right, thank you. Mandy Dalrymple here. We will open with public comment, and we'll start with our virtual public comment. If anyone is online and virtually wanting to provide public comment, please raise your hand so that we can move you over.
Can we get the volume up a little bit more?
Yeah. If you gave us any instructions, we didn't hear them.
It's for public comment online. Can you guys hear me okay now? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Okay. Opening public comment virtually. So anyone online who wants to do public comment, just raise your hand and you'll be invited over to present, to speak.
Is that one?
Okay.
Start. Brendan Green.
You should be Brendan. Brendan, you have the floor.
Cool. Can y'all hear me okay?
You're a little quiet.
Okay, I will
Good now.
strive to be loud. But thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Brendan Breen. I'm a Bend resident and organizer with Energize Bend and Deschutes Youth Climate Coalition, and I also work full-time as an engineer in the energy industry. As your committee works with other decision makers over the next couple weeks, just want to urge you all to consider how pushing electrification policy can also serve to improve housing affordability and security in our community. Groups like the RMI and Rewired America have modeled that heating and cooling our homes using all electric appliances is more affordable than their fossil fuel alternatives. These appliances are also more efficient. So they use less total energy from the grid that is becoming greener and more affordable as more renewable energy projects come online. Additionally, it's cheaper to build upfront all electric infrastructure rather than building an electric and gas infrastructure, and cheaper to package heating and cooling into a single heat pump system rather than having separate air conditioning and space heating systems. In the long term, perpetuating the climate crisis through relying on fossil fuels will also continue to drive extreme weather events that make it more difficult for communities to adapt to a changing environment, economy, and make it more difficult to be healthy. So building green, resilient housing is just an important strategy to keep our communities affordable and thriving for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Do we have any other virtual public comment? One more? Ready? You have the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. My name is Freddie Finney-Jordet. I use he, him. I'm a 22-year-old lifelong resident of Bend, a student and a climate activist, also with, the Deschutes Youth Climate Coalition. I'm here because Council has requested the input of this committee on the electrification policies that Council is reviewing. I'm a strong supporter of affordable housing and of making living in Bend cheaper more generally. As a student, I have been eagerly watching the progress Bend has made on housing affordability because I hope to continue to live in the hometown I love after college. To that end, I encourage this committee to support electrification and join advocates in the Environment and Climate Committee in recommending bold, strong electrification action to Council. Firstly, all electric homes, that is, homes without methane gas, are cheaper to build and cheaper to live in. According to research from RMI, which Brennan mentioned also, including methane gas piping in a new single family home in Oregon increases the construction costs by $2,800. For the person living there, utilities costs for a home with methane gas are $390 per year more expensive than for an all-electric home. Crucially, gas will only get more expensive as the climate crisis worsens and as the city, state, and federal governments ramp up efforts to transition off of methane gas. According to RMI, gas prices are expected to increase by up to 130% by 2030. We have an opportunity now to stop these runaway methane gas prices from affecting Bend's housing affordability. We have an opportunity to lock in more affordable, cleaner homes. Transitioning to all electric is much more expensive than going all electric from the start when building homes. That's why we want to do that now. By moving forward with electrification now, we are lowering costs for people who are here now and lowering costs for Bendites that are going to come to the town down the line. In conclusion, please encourage council to move forward with electrification so that Bend can continue to reduce the cost of living so people like me can continue to live here. Thanks again for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Freddie. Anyone else virtually? No. Okay. Open the floor for public comment in person. If anyone is here for public comment, please come forward. Okay. If you'll state your name. Yeah, go ahead. Come join us up here and state your name into the little mouse looking device. You have 3 minutes.
This is a mic.
That's a mic. Yeah.
Well, my name is Mike Reed. I'm a citizen of Bend for the last 5 years. My background is that of corporate accounting and finance, as well as medical clinical work, 2 careers. I'd like to reinforce what those 2 gentlemen just indicated about the impact of natural gas associated with the economics of affordable housing. It is a no-brainer to go electric, in my opinion. The other thing that's extremely important is to recognize that the associated with natural gas are the nitrous oxide pollutants. And there's multiple studies showing anywhere from 12 to 25% of people that are raised in homes using natural gas appliances, stoves, water heaters, so forth. It's highly correlated with respiratory issues, particularly in children. That correlation is very strong and marked. So it's not in the best interest of the Affordable Housing Committee to include natural gas in their use taxpayer dollars to help support affordable housing in Bend that uses natural gas. It presents a health detriment to the community they're trying to serve. And the other thing I would say is that Bend, what brought me to Bend is that it's a eco-friendly city with eco-friendly practices. And I think it would be detrimental to Bend's image to continue using taxpayer dollars that support building in not only uneconomical costs, but also ill health to vulnerable populations.
Yep. Okay. Anyone else for public comment here in person? Okay, that closes our public comment time. We will be hearing public service presentations today. And so I just want to go through and get a conflict of interest disclosure from each person, whether that is perceived or real.
If you don't mind, I'd like
Go for it.
Michael from our legal department to give particularly our newest AHAC members kind of a little recap of when and why you declare a conflict.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Selkirk. I'm another one of the attorneys in our office. Elizabeth unfortunately couldn't be here today, so I'm gonna try to fill her big shoes while she's gone. Welcome new members. I think we have one online. Is the other one
Richard is new as
here?
well.
Richard, welcome. This is going to be a very quick rundown of what can be a complicated set of laws. It's about your ethical obligations as public officials, now that you're volunteers on this committee. For the rest of you, you've probably heard this before from Elizabeth, so this will just be a good reminder. If you have any questions or hear anything new, let me know. So you all are public officials, and now that you're public officials, it carries with you ethical obligations. The ones that I'm going to talk about and that are most pertinent to you are the conflict of interest rules. And I'm going to read them just so I make sure that I get the language correct, because what we think as lay people as a conflict of interest often has overlap with what the law defines as a conflict of interest, but it's very specifically written in the code. So there are two types of conflicts of interest. One is an actual conflict of interest and one is a potential conflict of interest. The difference is whether or not the action or decision you're taking would necessarily result in a conflict or whether it could. So would is an actual, could is a potential. So I'm going to read them both quickly because I think the words that the legislature used is important. And then I'll give it a little bit of explanation. So a public official is met with an actual conflict of interest when the public official, which again is you, participates in an official action, decision, or recommendation that would affect the financial interest of the official, and importantly, not just you, but also your relative or a business with which you or they, so you or your relative, is associated with. So that's an actual, you all will very rarely, if ever, be met with an actual conflict because your charge as a committee is to give recommendations to council. So there's a step between the decision and the recommendation that you make and the final decision by the decision maker. So for all intents and purposes, you can kind of put that one to the side now. And I'm going to say the exact same language, except instead of would, I'm going to say could, and that's a potential. And this is the one that you all should be thinking about. So you're met with a potential conflict of interest when the public official, again, you, participates in an official action, decision, or recommendation that could affect your financial interest or the financial interests of your relative or a business with which you or your relative are associated. So if you have a conflict, it will likely be potential. What you need to do is declare that conflict. There's really no harm in declaring the conflict, and I would advise you all to err on the side of disclosure, or at least ask questions to Elizabeth when she's here or to Rachel about whether or not you have a conflict. After you disclose that conflict, you can then participate in whatever the decision is. Whereas if you have an actual conflict, you can't. So that's why the distinction is important. We generally do it at the beginning of the meeting, and that sometimes you have more than one thing on the agenda. You can give a conflict disclosure for each of the agenda or just for one. Usually we do it as a blanket for the entire meeting rather than a separate disclosure for each individual item. But you can always say, I have a conflict on this item, I don't on others, and I'm declaring it just for that item. So a lot of information quickly. I know you guys have a busy agenda. Any questions? Relatively straightforward. Great, awesome. Thank you. Welcome.
So Mandy will call all your names and just declare if you have a actual, which is very unlikely, or potential conflict, and then give a little explanation about why you think you might have that potential conflict.
All right, thank you. So Mandy Dalrymple. We will start with Allison.
Okay, Allison Hohengarten, I did not have a potential or actual conflict with any of the matters on our agenda today.
Yeah. Ian.
I do have a potential conflict of interest. I have an open employment application with Thrive.
Okay. Mandy Dalrymple, I have no or potential conflicts of interest.
I have no conflicts of interest.
Heather.
Heather Simmons, to my knowledge, no potential or actual conflicts.
Richard?
Yeah, Rich, I have no conflicts of interest.
Isabel.
Isabel Malkovich, no potential or actual conflicts.
Jeff. Oh,
Yeah, this is Jeff Wall. No potential or actual conflicts of interest to disclose.
All right, thank you. So we will move into our public services presentations. Presenters, you will have 5 minutes to present. There's a timer on the table, so just keep a slight eye on it so that you know when you're running short on time. That will give the committee 5 minutes to be able to ask any questions or follow-up questions that we need to. And it looks like we have Ben Church as our first presenter.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Pat Luce. This is Leslie Hopper, and we're the co-coordinators for Open Door Ministries at Ben Church, which is kitty corner across here. And I guess I can just read what I have presented. So Ben Church, first of all, was established in 1906, so we've been around for a while. And we have served the community in the ways that we're still serving the community, especially the poor. We provide presently mail service for people without a physical address, so they can get things like driver's licenses, they can get checks, they can get car licenses. We provide water, snacks, clothing, blankets, sleeping bags, tents, tarps, and personal care items. We also provide food, gas, propane, and emergency assistance for utilities, shelter. And we have provided $150,000 in seed money and participation in starting Central Oregon villages. These are 2 pictures. The one on the left is the mailroom at Ben Church. And we also provide the immediate needs, food, water, that sort of thing. The one on the right is our free store that provides clothing, gently used clothing. If you ever need a place to give clothing, we'll take it. And this is Central Oregon Villages, which is over Bear Creek and 27th, I believe. We're requesting $10,000 for a grant. Approximately 300 people without a physical address get their mail at Ben Church 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. We purchase snacks, fruit, water, boots, gloves, and other personal items as needed. We strive to meet other needs that are expressed, and needs have outpaced the monetary donations that our congregation is able to give. The use of the grant funds would go to meet immediate needs, especially help people stay warm in the winter, such as sleeping bags, tents, warm clothing. We help people deal with the heat in the summer, appropriate clothing for that season, water, shoes. We provide information on how to access medical care, shelter, and job-related needs. We provide snacks, food, and water whenever needed. Purchases, accountability purchases, and other expenditures will be tracked and reported as required. Ben Church provides the physical space for these ministries, and all staffing for these ministries is provided by volunteers. One part of our mission statement as a church is we strive to offer mutually empowering, multi-generational opportunities for kindness by listening to the longings and needs of our community and responding in love with our passion and our resources. So we try to give of ourselves as well as the goods. Our responsibility, the Ben Church family is committed to loving our neighbors, being generous to the poor. Receiving this block grant would be of great help in continuing to provide our services to those who need them here in Bend. Thank you, City of Bend, for allowing us this opportunity to apply for this grant and tell you about it.
Thank you.
I'm going to open it for questions from committee members. We'll start with online. Isabel or Jeff, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question for you. So these goods that you're purchasing to distribute to clients, where are you getting them from? And specifically, are you able to get them at a discount anywhere? Such as food banks or, clearance items from stores or anything like that?
I actually did the purchasing, and Pat and I together prepared for that by looking at a lot of different stores. We compared prices and discounts available at Dick's, Sporting Goods, and Big Five, Target, Bi-Mart. I can't remember exactly all of them, but we ended up getting our tents and sleeping bags at REI Outlet. They actually had very competitive prices, and we were able to get some very good gear. We had $5,000 to work with, and we got 28 tents that were solid, good tents, not just the ones that you see so often, the kind of throwaway tents. And they were a little bit bigger too. And let's see, I think those were about $80 a piece. And then we got sleeping bags. We got Kelty sleeping bags. They were, most of them were mummy bags. And they were good down to 0 degrees, which is important here in Bend. Actually, they were good down to 20 degrees. Those ones. Oh, my mistake. Yep. Anyway, they were good quality. And we did get a discount also through REI, did we not? They gave us a good price, let's put it that way. Wasn't technically a discount, but very competitive.
Thank you. Questions, Isabel?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
For me?
Yeah.
No questions. I have a question. I was wondering, how do you go about distributing these items?
Well, we're open 2 hours a day from 1 to 3. And the people came and we had a sign out, said On the that, door. yes, sleeping bags and tents are available. And word got out very quickly. And so we brought each person in and sat down with them individually and filled out a form that Melissa helped us develop. And so we have a record of who received them and also some demographic information about them and other things that were required. And we have a record of who received what. And most people wanted both things, but not everybody. But so it was pretty much word of mouth, and we were able to distribute them all in about 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah, 5 or 6 weeks. It was pretty quick.
Thank you. That was my question.
Mhm.
Thank you for your presentation and for all your work. A couple questions. Curiosity, have you received funds from, I can't remember if you've received funds from any of our resources through the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee before? And I don't think, not in my tenure, but I wanted to
I
clarify.
thought we did 5,000 last year. That was my understanding. Yeah.
Oh,
To start, it
yeah,
was the
just
first
last
time
year.
to see how you guys could do the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then would you accept CICT funds instead of CDB?
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That would be much appreciated.
I think this is Mandy Dalrymple. My only question was, how did you find the administration of those funds that we distributed last year? I know there's additional, the demographic information capture and things like that. How did you find that additional administration work?
It was all provided by volunteer
efforts, if that's what you're asking.
You mean, was
Uh,
it difficult?
Yeah, how were you able to manage it? Was it,
I didn't think it
feasible?
was difficult. It
Okay.
was very well laid out.
okay,
Yeah, and Melissa was so helpful.
Yes,
She came and had a
Extremely.
meeting with us and,
twice
yeah, we're
At our
at 2
request.
meetings
at our
and
request.
helped us figure out the paperwork and the process.
okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh,
for your-
sorry, I have one more question.
Go
which
for
is
it.
new to me. Would all these funds go towards purchasing items, or is there any distribution that would go towards services, and what kind of distribution would that be?
We've determined that the best way we can serve is by the sleeping bags and the tents.
Okay.
To try and do paperwork for a bottle of water for every person would be, no, would not work. And these are absolutely needed. Since we gave out the last sleeping bag on the 31st of December,
Mhm.
another person an anonymous person has donated 10 sleeping bags, and we're down to 3.
Mhm.
So it's an ongoing need.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
for your
you.
presentation today.
We appreciate your support.
Yes.
Our next presentation is Bethlehem Inn. If you want to join us, are you in person, online? I don't know.
Online.
Online, okay.
And I'm.
Audio and video. Hello, it's Gwen Weisling from Bethlehem Inn. I'm the executive director, and I guess I'll just wait for the presentation to come up, or do I present?
Melissa's working on it.
Okay, thank you. Well, she's getting started. I just want to say thank you. Bethlehem Inn is honored to be requesting a partnership again with the Affordable Housing Committee, and we thank you for your service in this capacity. Welcome all the new members. Bethlehem Inn has a history based on partnership and collaboration, and that has been an important one with the City of Bend over time. This slide here is really showing our values that drive our work and the importance that involves our community on so many levels. And these values are with our staff, our volunteers, our board leadership, internships, along with our ever increasing partnerships. And again, City of Bend has had a historical role in that. Bethlehem Inn is requesting $82,400 for our Building Futures Together. And this graph here provides an understanding of the housing continuum. The need continues to be an urgent one, and one that, especially the individuals and families that are coming to Bethlehem Inn for that second chance and new start. As noted in our application, the demand is surging, and we play an important part on this continuum, which, by the way, is not a straight line. You can see on the left side that housing availability really changes with the decrease of somebody's stability and the factors that accumulate causing homelessness. And we're in that third rung under a high barrier shelter, which helps to point people in the direction of transitional and stable housing. And we play that important role as a navigational place for the ever-evolving case management support. In achieving stability, Bethlehem Inn is a primary emergency shelter here in Central Oregon. We've been around for 25 years, and it really focuses on accountability-based services. In terms of being able to move from that one end of the housing continuum to the housing and stable housing, high barrier shelters like Bethlehem Inn really help to create the transition from low barriers into a more structured environment so that they can adjust to what it is like to have goals and guidelines and schedules and community participation expectations. And this is done with safety, stability, and accountability. We are a clean and sober environment, so that provides a place that is conducive to effective case management. And when you're experiencing homelessness, you are in crisis, and oftentimes decisions are based solely on survival. So Bethlehem Inn provides a unique environment where participants know their day-to-day needs will be met. They know their children will be safe. They know that the temptations of drug and alcohol won't be present. And they know that someone will be there alongside them, walking along. So safety and security are the foundation of that. Making long-term change and accountability creates an environment of that. The case management is part of a collective wraparound process between staff and the participants in assessing, planning, and coordinating with service partners to meet an individual and or family's comprehensive needs. Individual case management is providing a unique action plan resulting in resident safety, health, wellness, and self-sufficiency. The case managers focus on individuals becoming more self-sufficient, on being housing ready, and that process ensures that they have proper documentation and information needed to apply for housing in what is already a competitive market. But this also encompasses themes around home, safety, income, mental health, and well-being. This example of the self-sufficiency are the areas in which we work with each resident, each family, when they enter our shelter, and we do a system where we assess, as in the last slide, all of these areas, and at the time of exit, we're able to measure and show through the case management meetings that they have the progress that they make in all of these areas. And housing readiness. If an individual is working to, which they all are, to move into more stable housing, then these are the things that are needed. So when they are ready and their name comes up on a list, we have helped to provide them with that readiness. And this is just our example of the different services above and beyond shelter, meals, hygiene, partnerships, resource, safety, security that we provide for our residents. Some visual pictures of a family room, our staff at work, our clothing closet, our meals being served, and our partners. Thank you very much. We appreciate the consideration and open to any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. We'll go virtual again. Jeff or Isabel, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Isabel Milkovich. I actually have a couple of questions. First, just a clarifying question. So this is for case management, right? Not a program manager role. So the application says that you want to serve 1,100 people with these funds, and the funds are funding one full-time position, with, one full-time position being 2,080 hours a year, which means that's just under 2 hours per person of case management, with a lot of pretty lofty goals of working with clients through a lot of issues. And so I'm wondering, just if you could clarify how that is, that, are there multiple people in the household? And so there are, just sort of walk me through how the one full-time person can provide case management for 1,100 people.
Great question. So the budget outlines the request for one full-time person, but the budget itself is far more than what we are asking for. There are a total of 2 full-time program managers and another 8 case managers. We're just asking for one. So there is a very comprehensive safety net of staff that work with. It's not one person serving these 1,100. It is the entire program budget for that many that we're serving.
The whole budget serving the 1,100 people,
Correct.
not just 1,100 people for one person. All right.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense to me. And then my other question was about your partners. I'm wondering, do you partner with any other service providers, specifically, really close to that high barrier level on the spectrum of low barrier and transitional or even stable housing providers, as sort of to, help people pass through along this spectrum from one step to another?
Yes. Also very good question. We have over 70 partners that we work with. We have been a long-term member of the Homeless Leadership Coalition, and those partners meet on a regular basis. One of our board members serves, one of our staff members, program manager, serves on that board. So we, of those 70 partner agencies, it's Shepherd's House, it's The Loft, it's FAN, it's Thrive, it's medical, it's judicial, and all the whole spectrum. So we have, as well as substance abuse, recovery programs. So we reach out to do the things that we ourselves can't do. We can't do it all. So we work to ensure that we can maximize the resources and our wonderful partners that help us in this important work.
Thank you.
All right, we'll start with Richard. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have at your facility, how many individuals or families are you able to temporarily shelter at a time? And how long are they allowed to stay there?
We have 10 family units, and those are historically full at all times. And typically, individuals and families come in with a 5-week period that they are able to come into our shelter. And then they are able to extend that based on their case management as they're working on their goals and showing that they are able to set and basically take the steps and be actively involved in the case management process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing for me.
Yeah, we're gonna do time? Okay, yep. How does with the 1,100 clients to be served with the proposed project, is this an expansion of clients or a maintenance of clients that you currently serve?
It is about a 10% increase in what we have done in the past. We've seen a surge in the demand, and we're really grateful for our partners and those that operate in the low barrier shelters that help to move folks along the continuum. So housing continues to be a challenge, and so sometimes people are staying longer, but overall we see the need continuing to grow, and that people need the time and somebody to walk alongside them to navigate them to find a more stable place.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Thank you, Gwen. Next up, we have volunteers in medicine.
Work as well, or just the table?
Does the mic work up there? Yeah.
And I will just say the timer, when it starts to blink red, that's when.
Okay, great. Hopefully I'll be on time. Good afternoon, I'm Kat Mastrangelo, and I'm the Executive Director at Volunteers in Medicine. Can I move this slide? Okay, there we go. So our mission is to improve the health and wellness of the medically uninsured or critically underserved through the engagement of professionals, community partners, and dedicated volunteers. And last year, we served 787 low-income uninsured patients. Very significantly last year, because OHP has expanded and there's also the Healthier Oregon program, we had about half of our typical patient load was able to transition to OHP or insurance, which meant that we were able to bring in 150 new patients. That is unprecedented for us to bring in that many new patients in a year. And we've done that through partnership with Mosaic and with the LCA, going out and doing outreach in
in the region. We had almost 10,000 volunteer hours that were donated for a value of over $650,000. And we have distributed 2.2 million in medications from our charitable pharmacy. So just some numbers, just so you can get a sense of what the need is, because healthcare is different than housing, even though they kind of go together. But we estimate that there's about 9,000 people who could be uninsured, and this is actually within the county. We can only get that data at the county level. But we did have over 300% growth in our new patients over the year. And we estimate that we saved the emergency room from avoided emergency room visits close to $1 million. So we really fill a critical gap. And the reason we're here in front of you as a housing group is that, you know, medical debt is still the #1 reason that people declare bankruptcy. Even though those laws are changing and they're not going to be reporting medical debt, that still is debt that people have and they're expected to pay. So if we're here and we can take care of low-income people who need health care at no cost, then they have that money left to feed and clothe and house their families. So the people that we serve, they have to be living or working in the Tri-County area. For this grant, we restrict it to people who live in Bend. They have to be at least 19 years old and low income. And then we also put them through the process of applying for OHP, because if there's a way for someone to get services that we can bring resources to the community, we feel very strongly that we need to do that. 96% of our patients are Latino and Spanish speaking. We have a patient story here, someone who started off as actually a volunteer interpreter with us, ended up getting a job, didn't have insurance, and was worried. And we were able to work them up for possible multiple sclerosis diagnosis and provide the care and treatment that they need. So a lot of it's really routine care, and a lot of sometimes, and especially more recently, we're getting a lot more serious diagnoses coming in the door. Cancer, we've had 2 MS patients, and it's really, for our volunteers, it's really rewarding to be able to help people when they have that type of need. And then it's also really hard because people have waited so long to get the care they need. It's really easy to see the linkages between healthcare and stable housing. And we really try to look holistically with our patients, and we work really closely with them. So if they have other needs besides strictly healthcare, then we help give referrals for social services, food, housing. We partner to get healthy foods for our diabetic patients, because a lot of times those are more expensive. And so we really want to make sure they have the best chance for success. And that really means that our patients can stay healthy, stay on their jobs, and support their families. And then we also have a lot of specialty care from retired providers who come into our clinic. And so you can see the list there, everything from cardiology to rheumatology and a lot in between. And that's something that's really special too about our clinic. So kind of exciting, this year we are expanding our dental program, and we have found that we need to do this because there are not as many volunteer dentists in our community as we do have medical providers. And we have tried to replicate the program we have with medical providers with dentists, and with very little success. So we've written a grant. We now have a dental chair that's going to be installed next month, and we'll be able to contract with dental hygienists to give our patients the cleanings on site. And then as they need referrals out for other care, we'll be able to do that. So we're really excited about that. And then we also have a new grant to do medication therapy management, it's blinking on me, which is a program through our charitable pharmacy to make sure that our medications are all reconciled so that we're providing the best care we can.
Great, thank you. Nice work. We'll go questions online first.
Yeah, I have a question, Isabel Malkovich. I'm wondering, how do people find out about your services? Do you partner with any of the housing service providers that can let their residents know that you're around? or any other ways that people can know that they can go to you for medical care?
Great question. So we have the partnership with Mosaic and the Latino Community Association, and we had some funding from the state. That funding does end this year, but we have been going out. Oh gosh, we have been in front of thousands of people across the Tri-County area, telling them about services. If they don't qualify for OHP, then somebody from Volunteers in Medicine is right there. We get them engaged and get them through. That's how we've had 150 new patients this year. But really, the most important thing is the Latino community is pretty well networked within themselves, and it is word of mouth. Almost always, what we're hearing is my cousin, my neighbor, my brother, my aunt, my uncle told me that I should come in for care.
Excellent, thanks. And then I just also wanted to say, I read about, this data on during COVID, how few hospitalizations you had amongst your patients and no deaths. I think that's very impressive. So good work.
Thank you. All right, thanks. Richard?
Yep, I have no questions.
A few questions.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's really amazing to see this. I was wondering, maybe I missed it, but what specifically would these funds go towards? Is it for like managing the program itself?
Yeah, so, and we've had this partnership with this funding for, oh gosh, probably a decade now. And what we do is we apportion the cost that it takes to provide the direct services at the clinic, and we spread that out over the patients. And then we give you all a report of those 40 patients. How many times did they come in? How many labs did they need? How many outside referrals did they get? What medications did they have? Of course, it's all de-identified, but that is then how we report back to you. And you had a question about filling out the data sheets, and I would say the hardest thing for us is, in the healthcare world, low income is always defined by a percentage of federal poverty level, and so we always have to do that crosswalk back to the very low income metric that HUD uses.
I was also wondering, do you know what percentage of patients that come in are houseless, and do you do any outreach for houseless patients?
So, it's interesting because if you asked our patients if they were houseless, they would likely say no. That does not mean that they are not doubled and tripled up with relatives. It's kind of a different way of approaching housing. Our patients all have to be working, and because of OHP carries everybody who's 138% of FPL and below, that would pretty much cover people. A lot of times if people are houseless, they're going to be extremely low income. So we're taking that next step, between the 138 and the 300%. And the 300% we have chosen because that corresponds with St. Charles's 100% write-off for financial services.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good, thank you. Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. It's great to see
Thank
you all
you.
again.
Yeah, very much. Next up, we have Thrive, Central Oregon.
Take Pat's lead and use podium over here. Do you want me to bring the mouse with me?
There's a microphone over there, so you're good.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Manke. I'm the Executive Director of Thrive Central Oregon. So happy to be here again. Thrive is really busy, especially this week. It's Housing Voucher Week. But in general, we're quite busy across Central Oregon, connecting people to the housing predominantly and other resources they seek. About 30% of our appointments are these drop-ins that are represented in the graphic here around the region, where folks sign up and come in for a 30-minute time slot and sit down with one of my advocates to work on and connect to whatever resource they're after. About 70% of our appointments are now over the phone. So that's a big switch for us from back in the day pre-COVID, when everything we did was in person. So we found that this has really increased access, and our appointments just keep going up. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of the services we provide. As stated, most of what we do is housing. It's actually about 80% of what we do. So we we're known in the community for getting creative with housing, getting creative in a tight market and getting people housed or keeping them housed. It's what we love. I feel like we are real estate agents that don't get, what is it, that kickback, that percentage? We don't get that, but we get it in other ways where we get to help people stay connected to the housing they have or access the housing they're after. We get to have conversations like, oh my gosh, I have a door I can lock and I have a bathtub. So that's a pretty amazing thing to be part of. Next slide. Our averages are changing. I oftentimes put this in my my proposals just to try to give a snapshot. We see such a variety of individuals from 18 to late 80s. But I've seen again since COVID that our average age is going down. So that's always interesting to see. It used to be 52, now we're at 45. About a third of those we see are families. 40% have physical or mental health disability that they're reporting to us. Many that we work with are on a fixed income, and that's where housing comes into play again. Someone has a fixed income, the rent's going up, but their income is not. So getting creative about what other resources, what other partners can we work with in the community that have help for utilities or help for food or basic needs support to help spread that fixed income further. About 20% of those we serve are Spanish speaking as a native language, and 40% of our team is. That's been a real goal of ours from our inception and absolutely contributes to our growing number of those we serve that are Latinx. And as I think Kat said it, and I would echo the same, within that community, there's so much word of mouth. And so we frequently get to be part of, you know, my mom's sister cousin came, so now I'm here, I trust you, can you help me connect to housing or other resources? We have, I think, pretty fun data points in that green box. So 56% of our appointments in the last year were here in Bend. Our services are across the Tri-County area, including the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. But yes, over 50% of the work we do is here in Bend. Housing insecurity is primary as stated, and of course that's tied also to income insecurity. So back to fixed income or low employment, we're working with a lot of families with a single parent and maybe the kiddo or kiddos have a disability that limits the ability for parents to work. So that's where we're seeing a lot of that income insecurity. I made this proposal to really target a population of people with income at or below 30% area median income. And this is why 63% across our whole program are at that income level. And while many people are technically under a roof, it's usually not their roof. So there's so much work that we are trying to do with folks that have very low income. And as written here, for one person, that looks like $22,000 a year if you're 30% or below area median income. Last year, we were able to connect 100 families right here in Bend to permanent and stable housing. And this request, while large, the personnel portion of it still represents just 22% of our Bend budget for services. I generally am needing about 7 full-time advocates in Bend to provide services, and this request is for 2. Next slide, please. So this proposal is kind of 2-part, where, as stated, I'm looking to fund 2 full-time advocates, totally missed my blinking light, as well as housing cost supports, with all of this funding focused on those 30% and below area median income. Evictions are really high, and this is a low number because I realized I didn't have firm data on it. Anecdotally from my team, they're sitting with 1 to 3 people each week that are presenting an eviction notice. So that's a whole other thing that I need to work on to better support my team. But that's part of what this funding can help us do. Next slide, hopefully the last. Here's the lovely people I get to work with. And please ask questions.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry.
We'll
I
start
got so
online again.
excited.
Jeff or Isabel?
Yeah, Isabel Milkovich, one quick clarifying question. Is it, you're looking to serve 500 households or 500 individuals?
You individuals.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Yep. We'll start in the room. Richard?
Yep. Here's, how are you currently funded?
About 15 different ways. Um, so it's about 40% of our income now is fee for service. Our biggest fee for service contracts are through Pacific Source. So we are reimbursed for working with individuals that have organ health plan. So that's our biggest fee for service. The other 60%, 55-ish% of our budget is grants. Mostly government, some foundation. Our second largest funder is the Oregon Health Authority. Through COVID, which I'm somehow mentioning for the third time in this presentation, that connection again to health and housing, which is so tight, was really brought to the surface. And so now we have a really solid partnership with them. So those are our primary other funders.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand Thrive received City of Bend ARPA funding.
Yes,
Just
thank
in
you.
December.
Yes.
So can you talk with us a little bit about how that funding is being used versus the funding and services you're requesting?
Yeah,
to talk to us
absolutely.
about today?
So that funding is for 2 years, and that funded one full-time advocate, which is awesome. So one of our 7 is funded through that. That funding also provided $240,000 to help with rent, deposit, and application fees. The income level on that funding is 60% and below area median income. So this funding, hopefully, or has the potential to help pay for 2 additional staff. So of that 7, that'll get me up to 3 funded potentially through the City of Bend. And then a little over 100,000 that would again help build up our funds for rent, deposit, and application fees, but specific to those 30% and below area median income. I will have no problem spending that money.
So basically, this would just allow you to do more.
It does, yeah. It grows both the housing dollars as well as the funding for personnel.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is J Bar J Loft.
Good afternoon. I'm John Baker. I'm the development director at JBarJ. I just want to say thanks. It's not lost on me that you're volunteering your time and energy and intellectual capital to kind of allow more people to have more opportunities. So thank you. I'm here today to talk about our LOFT program's request for funding. The LOFT, as you may know, is an emergency shelter and transitional shelter for youth ages 14 to 24 years old. It's located on Bend's west side on Century Drive, right across from Cascades West, if that's a landmark. While at the shelter, all youth are provided, of course, intensive case management, individual life skills training, independent living skills groups, planning and support with education and employment and career training, positive recreational opportunities, and certainly transition to self-sufficient living, community resources and referrals. And when they transition out to the community, staff provide aftercare support for as long as the youth is needing support. And quite frankly, we support a lot of these youth for many, many years. We have scholarship programs. We have youth that we have subsidized most or the majority of their college education that maybe were residents in the program 7 years ago. So we stay pretty connected, and we want to stay pretty connected in getting people to where they need to be, or at least want to be. And so, when coming to the loft, youth are automatically entered into the region's coordinated entry system and then referred to JBarJ's housing program. Not to get into too much detail about the housing program, but again, supporting youth beyond just the emergency basic needs. We do have programs and opportunities, and we're supporting youth far beyond just the kind of loft shelter services, as we've done for over 20 years. And as you may know, we have a property that, through partnership with the city of Bend, we've taken management of, and we're going to be housing youth long-term and with subsidized rent and a lot of other benefits. What are the causes of youth homelessness? There are many factors that cause young adults and teens to become homeless. Many homeless youth and young adults have experienced significant trauma before and after becoming homeless and are particularly vulnerable, including victims of sex trafficking and exploitation. Youth who identify as LGBTQ, pregnant and parenting youth, youth with special needs or disabilities, and youth of color, particularly African American and Native American youth, are also more likely to become homeless. Of course, the need in Bend is high. 60% of the youth in Oregon experiencing homelessness are unsheltered. That is a large number if we're talking about Oregon as a whole. We know the numbers are even higher in Bend because the limited number of shelter beds that we have in this community. And our shelters are always at capacity. We are faced with so much need for this vulnerable population. This past year, we've been focused on working with our partners and advocating at the local, state, and national level, increasing program capacity, promoting youth leadership, and being housing focused. In fact, we as an organization believe and advocate strongly to have youth at the table for big discussions and decision making. And we do. We have a committee or board that we have meet regularly that really are influential in making decisions related to not just the loft, but all of our organization's programs. Our funding request is for $25,000. The requested funds from the City of Bend's block grant program are to support case management services for 25 homeless youth staying at the loft. And really, we're looking at that amount to help support the hiring or the retention of one individual to be able to stay at capacity for the shelter into the new year. And of course, it's worth noting, as you may see, we've been recipients of the block grant funding for many, many years. In fact, that funding really was pivotal in the creation of the loft back in the early 2000s. And so I think historically, this support has been pivotal and critical to its success. Questions?
Thank you, John. We'll start online. Effort and stuff. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering, so you said you're always or almost always at capacity. What happens with youth, and I'm thinking specifically minors who can't stay at a hotel by themselves? What happens when they come and you're already at capacity and don't have a bed for them?
Sure. Yeah, it's because we operate multiple shelters. Generally, we're able to find a solution within the JBarJ programs. Like we have a shelter in Redmond that has a lower capacity than the loft, but typically we're able to make something work. And frankly, we will find short-term solutions on site in our shelters, as I'm sure any similar organization would do, to ensure that people aren't kind of left out that need to be in. And as a low barrier shelter, such as the loft, there tend to be very few, if any, other options. We typically can make it work. We generally know when somebody is going to be transitioning onward to more stable housing. And then it's a bit of a puzzle to fit, the timing.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I have no questions. Great program, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, does this expand the capacity, or how does this work into that?
No, it really doesn't. Although that maybe is a longer term goal, we've been able to expand capacity over the last few years a number of times to the point we are now at 25 youth for the loft. But part of what this is, why we are seeking this funding as we've done before is, we have a number of federal grants that are coming up for renewal towards the end of this year. And though we believe there's a good chance that we will be eligible to receive those funds past that date, there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot more, frankly, competition for those funds within the Oregon. So we're really just looking to ensure that we can continue that capacity past when the previous block grant funds, are set to expire, or that timeline in July. Yeah.
What do you foresee might happen to this program if you're not awarded these funds?
I mean, I guess to put it simply, I don't think that this program will, it'll affect our capacity, our potential capacity. But we have a pretty diverse stream of funding that supports the program, and that's good, right? So we have state, we have some federal funds, we have, of course, individual donors, and a really kind of historical, strong base of support that we could call upon if need be, and that may make up any difference that we might need to if we don't receive these funds. But as far as the program, it's longstanding, it's necessary, and it's well regarded, and so I think it will continue. It'll just depend on how many we can work with moving beyond that timeline.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Next presentation is Saving Grace. Set the timer, please.
I'm Donna Britt, the Development Director at Saving Grace, along with Tristina Thomas, our LAP point person. And we're talking about our lethality assessment program today, which provides intensive and comprehensive services to our community's highest risk domestic violence survivors. Domestic violence is a pervasive societal issue affecting 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in their lifetimes. And the impacts of DV on the community are both acute and long-term and result in such things as families being displaced from their home and housing, loss of jobs, et cetera. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tristina to talk more in depth about the lethality assessment program.
Yes, so the lethality assessment program, or also known as the LAP, it is recognized and used in over 700 law enforcement agencies in 39 states. When they were doing the studies to create this program, it was shown that only 4%, that out of all the DV homicides, only 4% of the victims, the murder victims, actually reached out to DV services. So this program actually bridges the gap between law enforcement and community partners or ourselves to get connected to the survivor at that crucial time period right after an intimate partner violence situation has happened. Next slide. So what I provide, or we provide, is a 24-hour response to law enforcement identified high-risk survivors of intimate partner violence. When that call is made and we are connected to a survivor, even if we don't talk to the survivor and we're only talking to law enforcement, we are doing immediate safety planning. We are addressing the immediate safety needs in that moment with the survivor. I provide a wide range of services to each survivor that I come in contact with. So some of my services are, I do follow-ups, usually within the next business day. I usually only work Monday through Friday. Sometimes I work weekends. I get in contact with the survivor. We can either meet in person at the courthouse, wherever is safe for them, or I can do a phone call if it's not safe for them. We offer hotel services if it's not safe to live in to stay in their home if they're unhoused. We also offer shelter. It is a confidential location, so it is a safe spot for all the survivors in the Tri-County area. I offer safety planning. I give help with civil, which is family, divorce, custody, and restraining orders, stalking orders. I also offer criminal justice support. So I can go to court with the survivor. I can also assist with the Victims Assistance Office and the DA's office. So this kind of goes a little bit further into the supportive services. I very often support survivors finding safe housing. With an abuser getting incarcerated, usually that financial support is gone. They've either drained the account or they were the sole provider. And so they reach out to me to help with housing funds, to get them connected with either moving costs, relocation, past due rent. I mean, the list goes on and on. All of my services are confidential and they're long-term support. So I can either be involved for a day or 2.5 to 3 years.
Just so you know, while we serve Deschutes County residents, the services provided by the City of Bend CDBG funds will be directed toward those living in the city limits and receiving services in the City of Bend. We serve all survivors regardless of income. However, a high percentage of high-risk survivors served by this project are in low income brackets per the AMI. And just know that these funds that we're asking for will be used to cover staff support and staff wages of the law enforcement liaison, whose job is designated to provide the services that Christina has been describing. And some of the tasks are,
oh, I think we're one more before, one more.
Yeah, forward, one more. Project task. We're going fast.
Going the wrong way.
Oh. That's okay. We'll just talk.
Yeah, we're golden. Okay, so law enforcement refers high-risk survivors to Saving Grace. So they are the front blind workers. When they show up, they assess the scene. For many reasons, they'll give us a call. Saving Grace provides immediate safety planning and emergency shelter. I also actually go out and do briefings with law enforcement. I have met with every law enforcement within Deschutes County, which is what the LAP protocol is for. So from Redmond, the DCSO, Black Butte Ranch, Sun River PD, and Bend PD. Bend PD, of course, is the biggest. So that takes about 3 days.
And so, because we're running out of time, we're going to skip ahead and we're going to talk about how we collaborate with other community partners. Most of the partners that we collaborate with are also work with classes under the Fair Housing Act. And the bottom line is,
this does save lives. It does work. I'm actually a previous client and an LAP survivor that was referred to Saving Grace right around 8 to 9 years ago. So it works.
And thank you for your support, and we'll take questions now. Look, only 24 seconds over. I wasn't nervous at all.
Thank you. Jeff or Isabel, any questions?
No questions. Just want to say y'all are doing really great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, anything?
Yeah, I have no questions either. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation and your work. I will also ask you a question about awards, fund awards you recently received. Can you talk with us about how this request
Yes.
aligns with those services or is different, or you just talk?
Yes, I think you're talking about the December City of Bend ARPA award for $144,000. That award is for our survivor housing program, which is another program that Saving Grace runs. All our programs work in conjunction with one another, but these applications are for 2 separate programs. This smaller one that we're asking for now is for specifically the LAP position, who's helping navigate people who ultimately could be funneled to our housing program. But initially it's for that position so that they can do their emergency work and make sure that people are getting into safe shelter.
How is this position currently funded?
We are, or were, I should say, subrecipients of a Deschutes County grant that ended and was not renewed called the ICJR. That grant ended at the end of September in 2024. It had paid for 1 full-time position. Since then, we've been using unrestricted reserves to fund the position. And the way that we have a lot of flexibility, we have a lot of private funding along with a lot of government funding. So we have a lot of unrestricted reserves right now that we can move into that position because it is a program that we will definitely continue.
Great, thanks for work.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, one more question. What would the impact be if you did not get the seat?
So the long and short of it is the longer that we go without the funding, the more that it's taking away from other parts in our organization. So pretty much the more resources that are used are usually kept for our other needs. We are going to try to do our best to sustain my position because it is definitely very, very much most needed. I actually got connected with 210 clients last year. So it is a very high need in this community.
Great. Thank you so much, Donna and Christina.
Thank you
so much.
Next up, we have the City of Bend.
Hello, I'm Jana Ruby with the Transportation and Mobility Department, here today to present unique projects we have, which is increasing housing options for our disabled community and particularly people who can't see or have limited vision. And we, in a survey we did, discovered that people are not choosing to live in certain areas where particularly roundabouts, and then now some of the new infrastructure we're building is a barrier because they don't understand it. They can't navigate it as easy. So and in addition, I was at a roundabout workshop where one woman in particular, which kind of drove home the situation with new things, the roundabout or our third and Wilson protected intersection. We all can look at it and you can explain something you don't know what it is by seeing it. And so she struggled to even understand the concept. And so the fortunate thing is we have a solution, which is to create 3D models of these intersections, which can help them understand, you know, what the geometry is, where they can cross, where cars are coming from a little bit better. And so that's what this project is, and to also provide training and ongoing program of how we can build these with new infrastructure. And so, oh, my slide is tiny on my locations, but it just gives you an idea. A lot of this is in the east. The selected projects are the multi-lane roundabout we have at 27th and Empire on the east side of town, with some you know, developing housing over there. On Butler Market and 8th Street is on our transit route, and there's some lower cost housing in that area. And then the 3rd Street, 3rd on Wilson and 9th, and Wilson and 3rd, sorry. Where we have unique geometry, right, with our separated intersections. So it's trying to figure out, you've got to cross multiple spots with bikes and cars. And so that's where the 3D model comes in. So next slide. So the project includes the kind of design work to get from the 2D plan to the model and setting up. But the big piece of this project is setting up a standard way to do that. So when the engineers design plans, they can develop the layers and things needed at that time so that whoever wants to can create a 3D model from for each intersection as we go forward. And so there's a printing and testing with this first round of doing this. We've talked to people, and it's working with our blind community to figure out how thick, how tall, what material and what elements are helpful. So there's an iterative process with that. And then work with our orientation and mobility specialists and individuals in the community that have said, I can't live in certain areas because of these things, to eliminate that as a barrier. So unique project that will hopefully expand housing options for a number of folks that already have challenging, right? It's hard to find housing, hard to find affordable housing. And then if you're restricted, especially with roundabouts, because we're building more of those. So I'm excited for this opportunity. And again, it'd create not just a one-time project, but an ongoing format. And then the idea is that the city would create these. One option is to create a library that we have the models. And then it's depending on how the configuration comes out, it could be from $300 to $1,000 or even less to print them. And so people would have the information available so that individuals could print them, or we would print them for them. So lots of options. That's it. Any questions?
All right, thanks. Any questions online? Jeff?
Yep, I do have a question. So you talk about individuals printing their own models, which I know, you know, while 3D printing has been around for a long time, it's still not something that's in everyone's house. And then you said that you can also provide 3D printed models for people. How is this the type of thing where every person would have their own model of all the different types of intersections? Or how does this whole thing get disseminated to every single person who needs to have this information?
It's probably going to be a variety of opportunities. And so to your first question, yeah, most home printers probably won't do this, but there's, I think we have 2 in town, companies that can do 3D printing, and that probably will grow over time. But I think the idea would be that we have a couple orientation mobility specialists. We'll give them 3D printed versions. The city will have some as a library that people could check out, and then people could print them on their own.
All right, thank you.
That I will say too, there was, we've talked to some folks that have explored the idea of, do you put something at the intersection? And that is an opportunity and an idea, but a lot of times people have, you don't stumble upon them, and you wouldn't know where. There's no standard place to look, like go always to the southwest corner and you'll find it. So that it sounds like a good idea, but in practicality, that it's easier to reach out to like our consistent users and have housing, put the word out that we have this tool available.
In the room, Richard?
I have no questions. Thank you.
So within the checkout system, that the city would maintain for these models, would that be available at no cost?
That's the idea.
And then they would come in and they would take the model with them for a period of time, or would they just sit at a location and familiarize themselves with the model?
We like the idea that someone offered the like library checkout, because you could take it might take a while to, it's not a 10-minute, just go through, and it's more beneficial with somebody sighted, right, who's walking you through these, leading you through them.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. Is it just the idea of printing out one model that's standard for all the intersections, or would each have their own?
Each would have their own, because they're all different. And so the idea would be these are, well, every roundabout is slightly different, as you know, with geometry. They're not struggling necessarily with that nuance. It's more like, how does the car come from? Where's the circle shape? How's, the offset of these things? And so this project will get us one of each kind of thing that we have now. And then that'll, again, set the information. If we're building like separated bike lanes on Olney coming up, we could do one of that.
Okay.
So it'd be 4 different base models.
Okay, so it's 4 different models that are part of this program.
Yes.
Do you know how much it costs per model to print it?
It depends on what material and how much detail. And so that's why there's like a little pilot testing of like, how much do we need to explain the concept?
Yeah, I'm sure you also need multiple of each model, because multiple people are checking them
Yep.
out. My last question is, I think it's a really cool solution. I was wondering how you guys came up with it. Just out of curiosity.
So it was when I was at this roundabout conference, we had a workshop, and there's 4 people with different disabilities talking about navigating our infrastructure in town. And that was one of the barriers of, I can't tell where cars are coming, I don't like these roundabouts. So the whole, group was kind of workshopping like, well, what would help you explain that? And she's like, well, I don't even understand what you're saying. I need like a model or something. And it was like, ding, 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 ding. Wait, there's 3D models. Would that work? Oh, that would really be helpful.
Okay.
So, and then that happened about the same time I talked to our housing group that was saying that was a barrier. And then this grant opportunity came up that fit the 2 together. So maybe we have a project here.
That's cool. Are these models being made specifically for this purpose, or are they being, I guess I can imagine that a roundabout might have some sort of rendering already that could be brought in for this? Or?
We don't render
Okay.
it. Yeah, it's commonplace now. So we just do the 2D design.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah, and I've done a little bit of research, trying to put this together, and there's a couple people that have done it, but there's not like a solid system or a steady, like cities aren't routinely doing this yet.
Yeah.
So we thought it was a pretty cool opportunity.
Gotcha. Really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's neat too. I'm trying to make the direct connection, or how we measure the effectiveness of the project specifically for housing. I mean, I understand barrier for transportation. And I.
And
wonder if you could speak to that.
yeah, and I think that the easiest way to do that, right, is it's a smaller community. So walking them through the training, seeing how many people we can get enrolled and signed up in training, how many people the mobility and orientation specialists are working with. And then like, did that change where you're choosing, where you're housing and your access to housing, right? So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
It looks like our last presentation is the Home More Network.
Thanks for hanging in to the end.
Yeah, I'm actually really grateful to go at the end. Yeah, I like to get to watch everyone's presentations and then just kind of have that, sigh of relief knowing that I'm the last one. So, hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Gamble. I'm the executive director of Home More Network. I founded this when I was unhoused in 2022 after experiencing homelessness out at China Hat following my divorce in 2019. So collectively, I have about 2.5 years of lived experience of being unhoused and really focused on what those gaps in care were that I experienced as far as the most difficult resources to come by, and decided to make a nonprofit to address those gaps in care. Last year, we applied for this same funding, and we were very, very new to the community. So I think that's probably why we didn't get approved last year. It was following our very first grant, which was a Central Oregon Health Council community building grant that was $111,000. And so we came in right after that with this presentation, and we're like so excited to serve our community, but we didn't have all of that experience and the clients that we do now. So we have a different perspective as far as how we would do things and what has worked well and what hasn't worked well in the last year. So this is a revised version of last year's presentation. So some of the things that we focus on that I really like to work together with other folks on is collaboration in our community. I experienced receiving resources in what felt like a silo approach from a lot of our nonprofits. I think we're still breaking through that barrier of being able to learn how to work together, and how every single organization has a very specific role that they fill. With grants, there's a lot of competition as far as being able to get approved for something. And so there's always kind of this air of competition rather than collaboration. So I set out to also address that and bringing together not just nonprofit service providers, but also community members that are interested in being citizen advocates and mentors for our clients. So our mission is to simplify the journey of rebuilding from homelessness to stable housing. We've had good success with that so far. In the last year, we've had 16 of our clients be able to move into and maintain stable housing on their own accord just by getting them out of survival mode. So being able to get that survival state turned off, get their prefrontal cortex working again. They were able to work on future planning. They were able to secure their own home. We didn't have to pay for moving costs, rental assistance, anything like that. So we've had a really successful approach in being able to meet people where they are, address their barriers and their goals, and get them empowered to move forward in their life. So a little bit different approach than some of the other programs that are available. I think we're good to go to the next slide. Thank you. So some of the things that we focus on and that I was really passionate about when living at China Hat. This top picture is one of the cleanups that we helped public land stewards with back in 2021. I was out there in 2019, and there were quite a few sites like this of abandoned RVs and broken down vehicles that just end up getting torn apart for different reasons. And so this was one of the cleanups that we helped with. In 2021, in the course of 2 days, with the help of 35 volunteers and supportive businesses, we were able to clean up 50,000 pounds of trash in partnership with public land stewards. So we do focus on habitat restoration and then also humanity restoration, rebuilding people after trauma from homelessness, helping them to remember who they were prior to homelessness, helping them to focus on goals to get out of homelessness, including mentorship and personal development opportunities. Our 3-year goal with our nonprofit is to be able to offer rent-to-own tiny homes on wheels that people can build equity in during that 3-year process with us, to where they own it outright, and it would be a high quality tiny home that they can own and be able to move into an RV park or onto some property and have a safe place no matter what. Next slide, please. Some of our services for 2024. Started off with basic outreach. It turned into really collaborative outreach as we got to know folks and what their needs truly were. Those folks that we had good rapport with outreach were able to enter into vehicle flex funding. The folks that we knew were clean and sober, that lived in their vehicles and needed additional support, we were able to help 21 households when we originally set out to help 8 households with that funding. And then we also had some of our clients move into our personal development program. Next slide, please. In winter, one of the main needs that we found that a lot of nonprofits don't help with is propane. So we had a propane exchange program. I myself with one other volunteer were the primary people moving these 5-gallon tanks throughout the winter into spring. We did 399 propane swaps of the 5-gallon tanks, and some were bigger tanks as well. And then along with a lot of seasonal supplies, including sleeping bags, smaller propane bottles, a lot of dog food, a lot of groceries that we don't have the stats on the slide for groceries, but, and then a lot of vehicle support. In summer, we offered emergency meals. For the really hot days, we'd offer cold meals, for example, and a lot of drinking water. That was in collaboration with Bend Equity Project and United Way of Central Oregon. With the $5,000 grant that we received from them for emergency meals, we're still in the process of distributing those meals. Is it okay if I go over a little bit since we're the last? I think we're right at time.
Other things on our agenda.
Okay, all right, so I'll wrap it up. So basically, we collaborated with a lot of partners. We did collaborative outreach. Our request in this funding is for $25,000 to be able to serve 40+ individuals within city limits. We currently serve about 48 individuals within the city of Bend city limits, and anticipate we would serve additional clients beyond that. We did, one of the questions we received was about our recent funding with the City of Bend ARPA funding. So just to clarify on that, with the success of the Vehicle Flex Funding Program, that is our main focus for the TSSA, is being able to offer vehicle repairs, vehicle relocation, helping folks from the east side of the railroad tracks to relocate, and then also housing focused case management. So that funding is a huge support through December of 2026, but it does not cover anything towards outreach of basic needs. Some of the other nonprofits are able to cover those needs, but we're not able to do anything for our folks that are within the City of Bend limits at the time for outreach. And this will be able to expand our case management capacity as far as just what supplies we offer. None of it is going towards staffing needs. All of the 25,000 is just for the supply needs. The second question on there, oh, sorry, let me go back to the first one for a second. So how would we track these purchased items? I think what we learned is to purchase in bulk. It's a lot easier to keep track of things that way, and then there's fewer receipts to keep track of. We would have a list that clients would sign off as soon as they receive the item from us, verifying that they're unhoused and just what items they received from us. I have an app that I built for our client management software, and so I can show that to anyone that's interested in that as far as how we track our outreach, data entry, requests, just client interactions, all of our stats, our by name list, all of that is in an app that I built that we're able to use during outreach. We also have a bookkeeper that's coming on board with this TSSA funding, and she's able to help us beyond the TSSA as we continue to grow, as far as being able to do everything that we need to maintain compliancy within the grants that we're applying for.
All right, thanks, Jessica. I think we're
Okay,
gonna wrap it
thank
up.
you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do we have any questions online from Jeff or Isabel?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering what specifically would the grant pay for? Would this be like wages for outreach people? Would this be for tangible, goods? You're talking about propane tanks, or is there something else? Like where specifically would this money go?
So it would be for up to $600 per individual to meet basic needs, including groceries that we would purchase. Usually we take folks to the grocery store to help them pay for groceries, drinking water, camping supplies, seasonal supplies, ideally propane if that's allowed. Just their basic needs to help them get out of survival mode.
All right, thanks.
Richard, anything?
No questions.
Do you know if you could accept CICT funds instead of CDBG?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Clarify,
ahead.
some of those items she disclosed would not be CDBG eligible, so
Okay.
just planting that in your brains before we go into deliberations next month.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, now we will move on to the Houseless Service Grant Program. This is Brooke. Brooke.
Committee members, Brooke O'Keefe, I'm the shelter coordinator of the city. And I think Carrie's gonna run my slides.
I can see that you're sharing in Zoom. There it is.
There we go. So I am here just to give you an update on the Houseless Services Grant Program. And we gave you kind of a snapshot during the last staff report, so this will be a little bit more detail. So, we just like to start everything with some data from the point in time count, and for our new AHAC members, I'll kind of overview what the point in time count is. This will be a repeat for some of you. So each year in January, the Homeless Leadership Coalition conducts the point in time count, and this collects information regarding people experiencing houselessness in Central Oregon. The Homeless Leadership Coalition, or the HLC, is our HUD designated continuum of care. This is a regional count. It includes Crook, Deschutes, Jefferson counties, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. It's done on a single night in January, so it gives us a snapshot of how many people are experiencing houselessness on any given night. It does not account for folks that maybe became houseless the next night or the 6 months into the year. And we know that this is likely an undercount. The HUD definition of houselessness is very specific. It includes people living in places not meant for human habitation, like camping in a vehicle, those who are staying in emergency shelters or safe havens, but it doesn't account for people who are maybe staying in a hotel or motel and are paying for it themselves. And it doesn't account for folks who maybe are staying with family or friends temporarily or in a treatment program. And if this, we also have a very short time frame to conduct the point time count. So it's done over the course of about a week, asking folks where they stayed on that single night. In 2024, the point in time count showed there's 1,811 people experiencing houselessness in Central Oregon. This is a 10% increase from January of 2023. We've seen some pretty big jumps over the last few years with our point in time count, and one of the factors of that is that we are getting better at counting. We have better mechanisms to reach folks and more collaboration within the region. In Bend, in the 2024 point in time count, there was a decrease of about 5%, but on any given night, there's still 959 people experiencing houselessness in Bend. We also saw a decrease in unsheltered houselessness in 2024, going from about 73% in Bend to 55%. And there are 527 shelter beds in the city of Bend, and 216 of those are low barrier. So we can see that there is still a need within our community for expanded services. Next slide. Part of the reason, or what we hope part of the reason for the decrease in unsheltered houselessness and hopefully contributing to that overall decrease as well, is the increase of shelter beds available in the city. Council has prioritized shelter in the past several years, allowing for the system to really scale and grow. Council directed goals for this biennium are to maintain the 505 shelter beds that existed at the end of the last biennium. We have 527, so we are doing that. And then 252 of those beds have direct city support. Actually, I think it's 257 now. This includes a stepping stone shelter, which is operated by Neighbor Impact and is a project turnkey site. It's 28 rooms, 56 beds of low barrier shelter. and it is non-congregate, so every household has their own door. The Lighthouse Navigation Center is operated by Shepherd's House. This is the only walk-up low barrier shelter in Bend. It's 100 beds and it operates 24/7 with daytime services such as peer support, case management, hygiene services, and 3 meals a day. This is a former thrift shop and they are just wrapping up renovations of this site. So Shepherd's House has been temporarily operating at a few different locations and is now getting to move back into their normal space. Central Oregon Villages is the temporary outdoor shelter on Bear Creek and 27th. This is 20 units and it is a high barrier shelter, meaning that folks need to be clean, sober to stay there. And it has a bathroom, trailer, shower trailer, kitchen trailer. And safe parking is, let's see, previously safe parking programs were not receiving direct city funding. That changed with the ARPA grant, and I'll talk about those grants in a moment. So we provide technical support to those programs. There are 5 sites in the city of Bend with 21 beds. And they are all located at communities of faith, but public entities, businesses, nonprofits are also eligible to host those sites. We just haven't seen those partners open a site yet. And the Franklin Avenue shelter is 60 beds of low barrier shelter located at the former Rainbow Motel. This was a property purchased with regular debt service and wasn't intended to be used as a shelter, but council recognized the need for additional beds and directed staff to seek funding for that program. It's funded through the governor's executive order 2302, which declared a state of emergency due to homelessness. This one is also operated by Shepherd's House and it has set aside units for families and those who are medically vulnerable. In 2024 through November, our December data hasn't quite come in yet. These programs provided over 75,000 nights of shelter. They supported 86 transitions to permanent housing and 18 transitions to temporary housing. And the next one. In September, the city and the county held a joint meeting, and one of the topics that was discussed was the city and county owned properties north of town in the area commonly known as Juniper Ridge. At this meeting, the city and county agreed to establish what would become the temporary safe stay area. In October, both the city and the county held meetings to adopt a resolution which established the temporary safe stay area, which includes an expansion of services, including hygiene services, as well as outreach and housing-focused case management to support folks in transitioning out of the TSSA into shelter or more permanent housing. The city and the county both dedicated $400,000 towards this effort for a total of $800,000 for this portion of the project. Oh wait, maybe I don't want to go to the next one yet. No. To provide the framework to fund projects in the TSSA, City Council adopted the Houseless Services Grant Program in November. And this both gives the framework for those TSSA outreach projects as well as some other types of houseless services projects. So the total budget for the Houseless Services Grant Program is a little over $3 million using the remaining city ARPA. And there were 5 eligible project types. This included outreach and housing focused case management at the TSSA, new and existing safe parking sites, which is where we'll see those partners receiving some city funding, shelter services, and then houselessness prevention and housing focused case management. And that category is really a catch-all for all these other projects like permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing or other projects serving people experiencing houselessness. Applications for the grant program are open from November 7th through December 7th and were reviewed on a rolling basis by an internal review team who made recommendations to the city manager. We received a little over $9 million in requests. And now we can go to the next one. Thank you. So the temporary safe stay area awards included a contract with Neighbor Impact, who will provide the data management and case conferencing for providers at the temporary safe stay area. And this is a really essential piece of ensuring that all of the providers are able to collaborate effectively, and folks who are working with the same client can communicate about that, make sure that people are getting what they need to be able to move into more permanent housing or shelter. All of the other awards are to provide housing-focused case management and outreach services. There are a few entities who kind of have special niches that received funding. One of those is Homeward Network, who you just heard from, whose primary focus is going to be on vehicle repair, getting people's vehicles up and running, and helping people relocate their vehicle to areas within the temporary safe stay area, and out of there'll be a closure, so out of those areas. CAMP is the Companion Animal Medical Project, and they are going to be providing services for people experiencing houselessness who have an animal living with them, and that is can be a barrier for folks moving into housing. They need support in navigating how to apply for housing with an animal, and if they need to rehome that animal for some reason, getting help with that. Mosaic Medical is the other one with kind of a niche area of service, and they are going to be bringing their medical van out there, so that'll be great. The next one, these are the other projects that received funding under the House of Services Grant Program. Central Oregon Villages received, in addition to their TSSA award, received funding to establish 12 new safe parking sites, as well as to maintain their 2 existing safe parking sites at Bend Church. Mountain View Community Development received funding to establish 20 new safe parking sites. REACH, I'm going to skip down a little bit. REACH received funding to maintain their existing 15 safe parking spaces, and to expand safe parking through outreach to businesses or churches or other entities who may be willing to provide space for that program. Shepherd's House Ministries is expanding their Project Share, which provides outreach services through the purchase of a new vehicle, as well as additional staff. Saving Grace, it will be providing financial assistance and housing navigation services to survivors of intimate partner violence, stalking, sexual assault, and human trafficking, who are currently or have previously experienced houselessness or who are at risk of losing their housing. This can include case management personnel costs, rent assistance, move-in assistance, application fees, and household necessities. Thrive will be providing housing navigation resources and financial support to individuals and households at or below 60% of the area median income who have either are either a BIPOC household, have a senior or a person with a disability living within their household, have minor children, or survivors of domestic violence. These, similarly to Thrive's or to Saving Grace's, will include things like case management personnel, application fees, rent arrears, deposit and move-in assistance, and other costs associated with keeping people in their housing or helping them transition. Fuse has received funding for staff costs associated with providing permanent supportive housing at Legacy Landing, as well as in their scattered site program. Permanent supportive housing provides rental assistance to folks who have a history of experiencing chronic houselessness, which means that which is a HUD definition, and means that they have been houseless for a year or longer, or have had multiple periods of houselessness in the last 3 years that equal 12 months. And that they have a disabling condition. So some of those folks who may not be able to as easily self-resolve a period of houselessness. And then Mosaic Medical, in addition to their TSSA award, received funding to support their medical and housing focused case management in other areas that are not the TSSA. And I think that might be our last slide. Yes. Questions?
I have one question, Brooke.
Yeah.
Who or where is Mountain View Community Development?
Yeah, they currently provide safe parking in Redmond.
Redmond,
So
okay.
they're looking to expand into Bend.
Okay, cool, thank you. All right,
That's a lot of information.
thank you. Next we have staff report.
All right, so let me share my screen quickly. First, I want to remind you that now that you've heard all the presentations, you can submit those scores, which you've already preliminarily done, right? So it's just easy. If you haven't primarily done them, we want to make sure that we have those. Sorry, I just had the date in front of me, by February 6th, submitted by February 6th. Okay. Last night we met with Ian and Richard, participated in the council summit with advisory bodies to discuss recommendations for goals. We didn't have our November meeting to discuss that. And so I met with most of you individually to discuss those goals. And so I wanted to make sure that you all were aware that those were brought forth last night to this group. And I'm gonna share my screen, what that looked like. So
Recorded, Rachel.
it is recorded, and I'll show you how to get there next, but I just kind of wanted to make sure that you all knew what was proposed. And that was to make sure that you had suggested council revisit property tax exemptions with special districts for middle income and ADU rental housing, that you all give some input or maybe recommendations to council for that surplusing Juniper Ridge property for affordable housing development, and that you encourage council to continue approving any recommendations you make for funding proposals for homeownership down payment assistance to first-time home buyers. And that your recommendations for them to consider would be establishing a funding exploration work group for housing production targets, securing stable ongoing funding for shelter continuum and ensure that services are eligible for operational funding, unlocking infill for small lot development after assessing the potential housing production benefits, such as sidewalk connectivity and other rights of way easements or vacations, and continuing enacting policies for greater middle income housing development, such as SDC extended deferrals and or property tax exemptions. You can find those online in the, oops, it's not switching on Zoom, so let me stop sharing and then reshare. If you visit government and city council, kind of clunky, sorry. And then go to the council meeting monthly recap. The meeting is in their archives. There's the agenda, the meeting materials. You can see the sheet that we just went over with our goal recommendations, but you can see all the advisory bodies' recommendations. And then the presentation, there was a presentation that Russ Grayson gave, kind of highlighting what city initiatives would be for the next biennium. And then you can watch it on YouTube. And the last thing that I will share is you see it, it's just not coming up. Okay.
Yeah, that one said it's not responding.
There we go. Just the path to goal setting. So this is the month that council is getting all that community input. There's other events and opportunities to give your feedback as a community member outside of this AHAC body. So I would encourage you to do that. And then they'll be doing their council goal setting retreat on February 3rd and 4th. All right. So I just wanted to cover that for you all. Next Thursday, January 23rd, in council chambers from 3 to 5 p.m., Jonathan Taylor will be giving an urban renewal tax increment financing one-on-one. So if you want to like revisit that policy and those like incentives, just so that you have a greater understanding of what they are, he will be giving that presentation again in this room next Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m.
Will it be online or do we need to be here?
It will be online as well. So I will send out that, he will have all that information for me on Friday to send out to all of you. So look for that if you want to participate online. And then that joint meeting between the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, Bend's Economic Development Advisory Board, and the Environmental Climate Committee is going to take place February 24th from 2 to 4 p.m. right here in council chambers. Remember, I mentioned this last meeting. We didn't have a date yet. Can I get a show of hands of who all intends to participate in that? Tony?
I'm a tentative.
Handy
I
tentative. that's
Want
okay.
to, but I'm not positive where I'm going to be.
I'll be tentative.
And I had Isabel that you had planned to attend. Is that correct?
I think I'll be a tentative, and if I am able to go, I know I would need to leave early anyway.
I'll just make sure that Cassie Lacey, who is putting that together for she's the Environment Climate Committee staff liaison, that she just has all your emails and can update you with all the information, and then you can RSVP to her directly if it works or doesn't work. And then the other piece of that is there's a whole bunch of like free information. As you heard some of the public comments today, like there's a strong movement of advocacy of wanting some of the recommendations to be passed. And so I want to make sure you have all the information before we meet next month. Cassie Lacey's going to be giving a 30-minute presentation so that you have the chance. The presentation is not 30 minutes. I believe it's somewhere around 20 minutes. And then there'll be like a good 10-minute chunk of time for you all to discuss with her and any follow-up questions so that you can decide as an advisory body if as a body you want to write a letter or make any recommendations for that joint meeting. And it's okay if you decide you don't want to make any recommendations or that you want to make recommendations for or against. But we need to have that discussion as a body and come to some kind of consensus before our representatives go to that meeting, and then make sure that they feel confident in what they're going there and represent. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that upcoming discussion in February, and I will send you all the presentations that have already happened so that you have all the information before the February meeting you discuss as an AHAC group. So that's your homework on top of scoring. Yes.
So the pre-work or materials for this joint meeting will be released soon.
I'm gonna send that to you, if not tomorrow, then Friday for sure.
So we as a committee, because we're not all gonna be able to go to this joint meeting, and we have one meeting standing between us and that convening, we should review and then come prepared at our next AHAC meeting to have a discussion.
Yep.
About questions we might want to see asked or points we want to make or. Okay, great.
And then if there's any consensus of what you want to take into that meeting, or how you all feel about the recommendations that the Environmental Climate Committee is proposing. You'll see a lot in the media. It's a very hot topic right now. So just kind of be prepared, because what council requested when these recommendations were made to them in a work session, that's what I'll be sending to you to watch and that presentation to watch. Council said, we don't want to make any decisions until we hear back from AHAC and BDEB. So this has been something council has charged you to do, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's public comment, but it started today. I'm like, there's a theme. What's going on?
That's why they were here.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And you might hear some different opinions at your next AHAC meeting during public comment as well.
I hope we do encourage diverse perspectives to give us feedback.
All right. And that's all that I had for you today.
Okay, then we adjourn. Thank you, everyone.